Give a person authority over resources, and watch how fast their mask slips. Not metaphorically, literally. Within weeks of a promotion, within days of gaining budget control, within hours of being left unsupervised, the people around you will begin to reveal exactly who they are. The loyalty you thought you had built, the alliances you were certain were solid, the trusted inner circle you spent years assembling. All of it gets pressure tested the moment real power enters the equation. Most leaders discover this too late. They find out after the boardroom coup, after the client list walks out the door with a departing executive, after the subordinate they mentored for 3 years goes directly to the board with carefully curated evidence designed to make them look incompetent. The betrayal comes first, the understanding comes later, and by then the damage is already done. What you're about to learn is not a feel-good framework about building trust through vulnerability. This is the opposite. This is the psychological architecture that real leaders, the ones who survive long enough to matter, use to identify hidden threats before those threats become visible enemies. We are going to go deep into the science of loyalty, the behavioral signatures of Machiavellian operatives, and the specific methods you can use right now to read the people closest to you with far more precision than you currently possess. We will cover how power functions as a psychological stress test, why the dark triad traits cluster specifically around proximity to authority, how to design what behavioral economists call revealed preference situations to expose true motivation, how Cialdini's influence mechanics get weaponized against leaders from inside the organization, and finally, how to build what I call a loyalty architecture that protects you without triggering the very paranoia that destroys leaders from the inside out. This is uncomfortable knowledge. It should be. Because the alternative is remaining naive in environments that are not designed to reward naivety. Let us begin. Power as a psychological stress test. There is a famous concept in behavioral economics called the dictator game. In its purest form, one participant is given a sum of money and told they can split it however they choose with an anonymous second participant. The second participant has no recourse, no negotiation, no ability to reject the offer. Pure unilateral control over resources. What researchers found consistently across cultures and demographics is that a meaningful subset of participants kept everything. Not most, but enough to matter. Enough to tell us something uncomfortable about human nature when accountability is removed. You are handing someone control over resources, budget, information, personnel decisions, client relationships, and you are watching, consciously or not, what they do with that control when you are not directly observing them. Daniel Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2 thinking is instructive here. When people are stressed, tired, or operating under reduced cognitive load, they default to System 1, the fast, instinctive, self-interested processing mode. Strategic performance, the kind designed to impress a superior, requires System 2, it requires effort. Which means the higher the workload, the longer the period of delegation, the more autonomous the role, the more you're seeing the real person, not the curated version they present in structured settings. This is why the most revealing intelligence about a person's character comes not from the interview, not from the performance review, not from the team meeting where everyone knows the boss is watching. It comes from the moments of extended autonomy, from the project they ran while you were traveling, from how they treated vendors when no senior leader was present, from what they said about you in the hallway conversations they believed were private. The research on power and moral disengagement is damning. Studies published in the journal Psychological Science have demonstrated that individuals primed with feelings of power are significantly more likely to engage in moral hypocrisy, judging others harshly for the same behaviors they permit themselves. Power does not corrupt universally, but it does amplify whatever is already present. The generous become more generous. The exploitive become more exploitative. And the Machiavellian, the ones who are already calculating every interaction in terms of personal advantage, they become precisely the threat you failed to see coming. The behavioral signature of Machiavellian operatives. Machiavellians are not the cartoonish villains that popular culture makes them out to be. They are not reckless. They are not emotionally volatile. They do not leave obvious traces. What makes them genuinely dangerous inside organizations is precisely their patience, their social intelligence, and their capacity to maintain a performance that feels authentic for extended periods of time. But they do have a signature, and once you know what to look for, it becomes remarkably consistent. The first marker is what psychologists call strategic self-presentation. Machiavellians invest disproportionate energy in managing upward impressions. They're almost always better performers in front of senior leadership than they are with peers or subordinates. If you have ever wondered why a particular person seems to radiate competence in your presence, but leaves a trail of frustration and resentment among the people who actually work with them daily, that asymmetry is data. It is telling you something. A person who performs one way for power and another way for everyone else is not having an off day. They are revealing their operating system. The second marker is triangulation. Machiavellian operatives rarely confront threats directly. Instead, they build coalitions quietly, create information asymmetries, and position themselves as essential bridges between factions. They control what you hear and from whom. Robert Cialdini's principle of social proof gets weaponized here. The Machiavellian ensures that the voices reaching you are pre-filtered, that the consensus you perceive has been shaped before it arrives. If you notice that a particular person seems to be the hub through which most interpersonal information flows to you, ask yourself why. Is it proximity, competence, or control? The third marker is what I call zero-sum narration. Machiavellians tend to frame situations in ways that create winners and losers where collaboration might otherwise have been the natural response. They will subtly position colleagues as threats, elevate rivalries that serve their interests, and present themselves as the loyalist amid a sea of unreliable others. Over time, this narration is designed to make you dependent on them as an interpreter of reality. By the time you realize their interpretation has been consistently self-serving, they are already deeply embedded in your decision-making infrastructure. Richard Christie and Florence Geis, who developed the original Mach-Ives scale in the 1970s, identified a core belief structure underlying Machiavellianism: that people are fundamentally manipulable, that emotions are liabilities, and that morality is a performance rather than a constraint. You cannot reliably detect this belief structure through direct conversation, but you can detect its behavioral outputs over time, if you know where to look. The revealed preference test behavioral economists use the concept of revealed preference to cut through stated intentions and observe actual behavior under real conditions. What people say they value and what they demonstrably prioritize when resources are scarce and trade-offs are forced. These are almost never identical. Your job as a leader is to close that gap in your intelligence. There are several ways to design revealed preference situations without crossing into manipulation or creating toxic organizational cultures. The first is resource scarcity delegation. When you deliberately create a scenario in which someone must allocate a limited resource, budget cuts, personnel allocation in a constrained hiring environment, credit distribution on a team's success, and you observe the outcome carefully, you are reading revealed preference. Did they protect their territory or optimize for the team? Did they take the credit or distribute it? These are not small data points. They are windows into operating logic. The second is loyalty under social cost. This one is more subtle and more powerful. Create a situation in which defending your position, your project, or your reputation carries a social cost for the person you are observing. Not a manufactured crisis. Simply a real moment when agreeing with you is professionally inconvenient. The person who agrees with you when it is easy is giving you zero information. The person who takes a public stance in your favor when doing so requires them to absorb some friction. That person is revealing something real. Richard Thaler's work on mental accounting is relevant here. People assign different psychological weight to gains and losses depending on context and framing. Loyalty is no different. The way someone accounts for the cost of standing by you tells you how they have mentally categorized the relationship. Is it a transactional exchange where loyalty expires when the math changes, or is it something more durable? You will not know from asking. You will know from watching. The third method is the information access test. Control the flow of sensitive information carefully and observe where it surfaces. This is not paranoid surveillance, it is structural intelligence. If you share a piece of genuinely sensitive strategic information with a small, known group and it subsequently appears in contexts it should not, you have revealed a leak. Not definitively identified the source, but significantly narrowed the field. Organizations that refuse to take information security seriously at the interpersonal level are not being trusting. They are being careless. Cialdini's weapons turned inward. Robert Cialdini identified 6 core principles of influence, reciprocity, commitment, and consistency: social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. Every one of these principles can be and regularly is weaponized against leaders by the people inside their organizations. Understanding how this works is not optional for anyone operating in competitive environments. Reciprocity is perhaps the most insidious. The Machiavellian operative does not request favors. They give them strategically early and in ways that create felt obligation without explicit agreement. They help you before you ask. They solve a problem you did not even know you had. And when the moment comes to call in that social debt, it arrives in a framing that makes refusal feel like ingratitude. Leaders who are not conscious of the reciprocity dynamic operating within their inner circle will consistently find themselves making concessions that feel reasonable in isolation, but that have been deliberately architected. Commitment and consistency is the trap of the incremental ask. A skilled internal operator does not make a large request of their leader, they make a small one, then a slightly larger one. Then, by the time the genuinely significant commitment is required, you have already established a pattern of agreement that makes refusal psychologically costly. Cialdini documented this exhaustively in controlled settings. In organizational settings, it plays out across months and years, and it is nearly invisible unless you are tracking the arc of requests over time rather than evaluating each one in isolation. Authority, your own authority, gets used against you through what I call borrowed credibility. The operative cites your name, your stated positions, your past decisions, to pre-authorize actions you were never explicitly asked to approve. By the time you become aware of it, the action is already taken, the precedent is established, and declining to endorse it retroactively creates its own political costs. This is a sophisticated move, and it requires that you maintain a precise documented record of what you have actually committed to versus what has been attributed to you. Liking is the most personally destabilizing, because we do not want to believe that the people we genuinely enjoy are working against us. Machiavellian invests heavily in personal rapport, not because they have particularly warm feelings, but because likability is a strategic asset. Research on jury decision-making, hiring practices, and performance evaluation consistently shows that we systematically overrate the competence and trustworthiness of people we like. If you find yourself defending someone's behavior despite pattern evidence to the contrary, and the primary reason you can articulate is that you simply like them, stop. Recognize that as a potential exploit. Building loyalty architecture without paranoia here is where most treatments of this subject fail. They generate vigilance without providing structure. They create leaders who become so suspicious that they destroy the genuine loyalty they do have, driving trustworthy allies away through the very behavior designed to protect against untrustworthy ones. Paranoia is not a security strategy. It is a liability. What you need instead is what organizational psychologists call a differentiated trust architecture. Not uniform trust. A calibrated, layered system in which access to your actual decision-making, your genuine vulnerabilities, and your real strategic thinking is controlled based on demonstrated behavior over time, not on performance in structured settings. The first principle of this architecture is separation of information by consequence. Not everything needs to be known by everyone in your inner circle. Create natural tiers. The information you share with your most trusted advisors should be genuinely different in strategic sensitivity from what flows through broader networks. This is not secrecy for its own sake, it is structural prudence. The second principle is the long game test. Loyalty built over time under varied conditions is categorically different from loyalty displayed in a single high-stakes moment. The person who has been consistent in low-stakes situations, who has told you small, uncomfortable truths, who has protected your reputation in conversations where it would have been easy not to, who has flagged problems before they became crises. This person has demonstrated loyalty through accumulated evidence. The person you have known for 2 years who has never once disagreed with you has demonstrated something else entirely. The third principle is what behavioral researchers call prospective regret analysis, applied to personnel decisions. Before elevating someone to genuine proximity, ask yourself the following. If this person turned against me in 18 months, what would they know and what could they do with it? If the answer to that question generates serious discomfort, the question is not whether to trust them. It is whether the organizational structure itself has given any single person too much leverage. The goal is never zero trust. The goal is distributed risk. Finally, and this is perhaps the most psychologically demanding principle, distinguish between betrayal and disappointment. Not everyone who fails you is a Machiavellian threat. Some people are simply human. They are afraid, or ambitious, or operating under pressures you are not fully aware of. The framework we have discussed today is not an invitation to pathologize every deviation from your expectations. It is a tool for identifying genuine, consistent patterns that signal something structural about a person's operating logic. Kahneman talks about the difference between noise and bias. Noise is random variation. Bias is systematic distortion in a consistent direction. It consists one bad decision from someone who has been reliably solid is noise, a consistent pattern of behavior that serves their interests at your expense, executed with increasing sophistication over time, that is bias. That is the signal you are looking for. The most dangerous thing you can do in a position of power is to confuse comfort with safety. The people who make you feel most assured, most understood, most allied with, those are the exact people whose loyalty deserves the most rigorous testing, not because trust is impossible, but because earned trust is the only kind that functions when the real pressure arrives. Power does not reveal character slowly. It reveals it immediately to anyone paying careful enough attention to see it. If this reframes how you see the people closest to you, subscribe. More of this ahead.